Let me tell you something most people get wrong. They think people who don't trust anyone are afraid of being betrayed, but that's not it. These people have learned that betrayal is the pattern, and when your mind recognizes a pattern, it stops waiting for exceptions. An installed belief becomes your reality. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you how this belief can either set you completely free, or you can ignore this video and choose to isolate yourself forever. We live in a world that constantly tells us to trust. Trust the process, trust people, give second chances, forgive and forget. It's woven into every story we're told as children. The hero trusts the mentor. The lover trusts the beloved. Trust is supposed to be the foundation of everything good. Yet some people walk through life with invisible walls. They're polite, they smile, they even laugh with you. But there's a distance you can feel. Not coldness exactly, something else, a space they never let you cross, and when you ask them why, when you press just a little, they say nothing, or they change the subject. Or they give you a reason so casual it almost sounds reasonable. But underneath that calm exterior, there's an entire system running, a surveillance mechanism that never sleeps. Every word you say is cross-referenced. Every promise you make is stored with an expiration date already attached. They're not paranoid. Paranoia is irrational fear. This is calculated assessment. They've seen the movie before. They know how it ends. You might know someone like this. Maybe you are someone like this. And here's the question that always lingers in people's minds. Why? Why would someone choose to live like that? Why build walls when the whole world says connection is what makes us human? It's easy to assume they're damaged, broken, stuck in the past. But that's not the full picture. Beneath the surface, there's an entire psychology at play, one that reveals something profound about human adaptation, survival, and the invisible cost of being hurt too many times. Most people miss the core truth. Distrust isn't weakness, it's not even fear, it's a conclusion, a decision the mind makes after collecting enough evidence. And once that decision is made, it doesn't matter how many good people show up afterward. The pattern has already been established. The data is in, and the mind, in its cold efficiency, simply stops believing in outliers. So when you meet someone who doesn't trust anyone, you're not meeting someone who's afraid. You're meeting someone who's done the math, and the math told them that hoping is more dangerous than knowing. But what really happens inside the mind of someone who decided that trusting is too dangerous? What shifts in the brain when vulnerability becomes a liability instead of a bridge? That's where this gets interesting. Because the psychology of distrust isn't just about protection. It's about control. And control, when you've lost it before, feels like the only thing worth holding on to. Distrust is not emptiness. It's hyper-awareness. When you walk into a room and feel relaxed, your brain is running on autopilot. It assumes safety. It assumes people mean what they say. It takes things at face value. That's the default setting for most humans. We're wired to connect, to belong, to believe. But people who don't trust anyone, their brain never shifts into autopilot. It stays in manual mode, always. Every conversation is being recorded and analyzed. Every smile is checked for authenticity. Every compliment is scanned for hidden motives. They notice the micro pause before you answer, the way your eyes shift when you're about to lie, the inconsistency between what you said last week and what you're saying now. This isn't paranoia. Paranoia sees threats that aren't there. This is pattern recognition on overdrive. They've been burned enough times to know that danger doesn't announce itself. It smiles first. It makes promises. It looks you in the eye and swears it's different this time, so they watch. Not because they want to catch you in a lie, but because they need to know if you're safe. And the exhausting part, you probably are safe. You probably do mean well, but their brain can't afford to assume that anymore. Assumption is what got them hurt before. Consider the feeling of real disappointment. That moment when you realize someone you trusted wasn't who you thought they were. That sensation in your chest like something cracked. Now multiply that across years, different faces, different situations, until it's not shocking anymore. It's just expected. That's where distrust is born. Not from one betrayal, but from a relentless accumulation. Someone breaks their word. Another disappears when you needed them. A promise evaporates. Each instance chips away at your ability to believe the next person will be different. The mechanism operating underneath is primal. Your brain is designed to keep you alive, not to keep you happy. When it recognizes a repeating sequence, It doesn't care about exceptions. It cares about survival. If trusting people has led to pain more often than safety, your brain files trust under threat and activates defense protocols. There's a shift that happens in your internal control center. Your sense of safety stops coming from connection and starts coming from vigilance. You're not withdrawing because you don't want love. You're withdrawing because love, in your experience, has been the weapon people use to get close enough to hurt you. So distrust becomes a form of control. If you never fully let someone in, they can't fully destroy you. If you keep one foot out the door, you can leave before they do. If you test them constantly, you'll catch the lie before it catches you. It's not cold, it's calculated. And the person doing it isn't trying to hurt you, they're trying not to be hurt again, because the alternative, the risk of opening up and being wrong one more time, feels unbearable. But here's the part nobody talks about. This system, this constant scanning and testing and holding back, it doesn't just protect you, it slowly changes you. Because when you spend every moment looking for danger, you start seeing it everywhere, even when it's not there, especially when it's not there. And that's when protection starts becoming something else entirely, something heavier, something that doesn't just keep people out. It keeps you locked in. It wasn't one betrayal, it was a pattern. That's what people on the outside never quite grasp. They hear about one big event, one dramatic moment, and they think that's what broke someone's ability to trust. And yes, those moments matter, but they're not the whole story. The real damage happens in layers, small cuts over years, promises that weren't quite kept, affection that came with conditions, love that disappeared the moment you stopped performing. And each time it happened, you told yourself it was a one-off, an exception, bad luck. You gave the next person a clean slate because that's what you're supposed to do. That's what trust means, right? But your brain was keeping score. Every time someone let you down, it filed the data. Every time words didn't match actions, it noted the discrepancy. And somewhere along the way, without you even realizing it, your mind stopped seeing these as isolated incidents. It started seeing a structure, a repeating sequence, a pattern, and patterns are how the brain predicts the future. When you touch fire and it burns you once, you're cautious. Twice, you're careful. 3 times, 4 times, 10 times, you stop believing fire can be anything but dangerous. It doesn't matter if someone shows you a candle and says this one's different. Your nervous system has already made its ruling. Fire burns, trust hurts. The case is closed. This is where people who don't trust anyone are living. Not in the aftermath of one catastrophic event, but in the quiet certainty that comes from overwhelming evidence. They didn't wake up one day and decide to shut people out. They were slowly taught over years that openness leads to pain, and the teaching didn't come from strangers. It came from the people who were supposed to be safe. That's the part that rewires you. When danger comes from where safety should be, your entire system recalibrates. If you can't trust those closest to you to protect you, to keep their word, to stay when things get hard, then who exactly can you trust? The answer your brain arrives at is simple and devastating. No one. The complexity deepens when you realize it's not a choice they're making. It's not some philosophical stance or cool detachment. It's survival economics. Every human being has a limited amount of emotional energy. You can spend it trusting and then recovering from betrayal. Or you can spend it protecting yourself from betrayal in the first place. And if you've spent years in the first category, bleeding out every time someone disappoints you, eventually your mind makes an executive decision. It cuts the losses. It shifts the budget. It decides that the cost of hoping is higher than the cost of assuming the worst. So distrust stops being a reaction. It becomes a strategy. And once it's a strategy, it doesn't just apply to the people who hurt you. It applies to everyone. Because your brain isn't interested in fair. It's interested in safe. And safe, according to all available data, means keeping everyone at arm's length. What people rarely understand is that distrust doesn't only target strangers. It doesn't stop at the people who might hurt you. It reaches into every relationship you have, even the ones you want to keep, even the ones with people who've done nothing wrong. Because when your mind sees betrayal as the baseline, loyalty starts looking like the exception. And exceptions, your brain has learned, don't last. People who don't trust can still love deeply. They just separated love from vulnerability. That sounds contradictory, doesn't it? How can you love someone and not trust them? How can you care about someone while simultaneously keeping a part of yourself locked away from them? But it's not only possible. For some people, it's the only way love can exist at all. Somewhere along the way, they learned that love doesn't protect you, that caring about someone doesn't mean they won't hurt you. In fact, often it's the people you love most who have the clearest shot at your heart. So they made a decision, maybe not consciously, but deep in the architecture of how they relate to others. They decided to split the two. You can have their presence, their time, their affection even, but you don't get their full vulnerability. That stays guarded, behind walls you can't see but will definitely feel if you push too hard. This is what psychologists might call monitored intimacy, though the people living it wouldn't use that term. They just know that being close to someone doesn't mean letting them all the way in. They've learned to love with one foot already out the door, not because they want to leave, but because if they have to leave, they want it to be on their terms this time. And this creates a strange kind of relationship dynamic. You're sitting right next to them, but there's a distance you can't cross. They'll tell you about their day, but not about the weight they're carrying. They'll laugh with you, but won't cry in front of you. They'll say they love you and they mean it, but when you ask them what they're really feeling, they say they're fine. Always fine. The people who love them feel this. They can't always name it, but they feel it. There's a closeness that never quite becomes complete, a warmth that never fully thaws. And when they bring it up, when they say, "I feel like you're holding back," the response is usually calm, measured and completely unsatisfying. "I'm right here, I'm not going anywhere, what more do you want?" But what they want is the thing that's not being offered: full presence, unguarded honesty, the kind of vulnerability that says, "I trust you enough to let you see me completely." And that's the one thing people who don't trust can't give, not because they don't want to, but because their system won't allow it. Because vulnerability, to them, isn't connection, it's exposure. It's handing someone the map to where you're most breakable and hoping they don't use it. And they've seen that map used too many times, so they keep it hidden, even from the people they love, especially from the people they love. The painful truth is that the person on the other side of this dynamic often has no intention of hurting them. They're patient, they're kind, they're trying to prove that not everyone is like the ones who came before. But none of that matters, because the person who doesn't trust isn't evaluating them based on who they are. They're evaluating them based on what they could become. Every kind gesture is read as temporary. Every promise is heard with an invisible expiration date. Every "I love you" is met with an internal "yeah, for now." Not because they're cynical by nature, but because their past has taught them that the pattern always reveals itself eventually. People change, feelings fade, and the ones who swear they're different usually prove they're not. So they stay, they love, they show up, but they never fully arrive. And the tragedy is that this distance, this self-protection, often becomes the very thing that pushes people away. The person they're guarding against losing eventually leaves, not because they wanted to hurt them, but because loving someone who won't fully let you in becomes unbearable over time. And it's precisely this separation, this gap between loving and trusting, that creates the greatest internal conflict of all, because they're not avoiding pain, they're just redistributing it. Instead of the sharp shock of betrayal, they live with the constant ache of loneliness. And the question becomes, which one is actually survivable? There's an exhaustion that comes from never lowering your guard, a kind of loneliness that no one sees. Imagine carrying a weight everywhere you go, not a physical one, but something heavier, the weight of constant assessment, of measuring every word before you speak, of watching every reaction to see if it confirms what you already suspect. Most people get to relax around the people they care about. For people who don't trust, there's no such thing as relaxing. There's only different levels of vigilance. And it's not just about other people. It's about yourself too. Because when you've decided that trusting is dangerous, you start policing your own instincts. You feel warmth towards someone and immediately question it. You want to open up and then stop yourself mid-sentence. You catch yourself hoping that maybe this person is different, and you shut that hope down like it's a threat. Because hope, in this system, is the enemy. Hope is what got you hurt before. Hope is the crack in the armor that lets the blade in. So you kill it before it kills you. And every time you do that, every time you stop yourself from believing, a little part of you goes quiet. Not dead, just silent, waiting for permission that never comes. This is the hidden cost of distrust. It doesn't just keep others out. It keeps you locked in. You become your own warden, your own surveillance system. And the prison you've built to protect yourself starts feeling less like safety and more like suffocation. The very thing you're protecting yourself from starts happening anyway. Not because people betray you, but because you push them away before they get the chance. You test them until they fail. You withdraw until they stop trying. You build walls so high that eventually people stop attempting to climb them. And then you tell yourself, see, I knew they'd leave, I knew they weren't real. But the truth you don't want to face is that sometimes they left because you made it impossible to stay. Not because they didn't care, but because reaching someone who never reaches back drains you until there's nothing left to give. The irony is brutal. You spent so much energy protecting yourself from abandonment that you engineered it. You were so afraid of being hurt that you hurt first. And now you're alone, but you can tell yourself it was a choice, that you saw it coming, that you were right all along. Except you weren't right, you were scared. And fear, when it runs the show for long enough, starts destroying the very things it claims to protect. Your relationships become transactional. Your friendships become shallow. Your love becomes conditional in ways you swore you'd never allow. And the worst part? You're aware of it. You see what you're doing. You watch yourself sabotage connections that could have been real. You feel the loneliness pressing in. But changing feels more dangerous than staying stuck, because at least this kind of pain is familiar. At least you know how to survive it. But surviving isn't the same as living. And there comes a moment, sometimes in the middle of the night, when it's quiet and you can't distract yourself anymore, when you realize that the walls you built to keep pain out have also kept everything else out. Joy, intimacy, the feeling of being truly known. You wanted to protect your heart, but you ended up burying it. And you start to wonder if the cost of being safe is too high. If protecting yourself from the possibility of being hurt means you're already living the hurt you were trying to avoid. If isolation dressed up as strength is really just fear that learned how to justify itself. But there is a turning point, a moment where distrust stops commanding you and you start choosing, where protection becomes a tool you use consciously, not a prison you live in unconsciously. And that moment changes everything. The strongest people aren't those who trust blindly. They're the ones who trust selectively. There's a difference that most people miss. Trusting everyone is naive. Trusting no one is imprisonment. But choosing who to trust and how much and when, that's wisdom. That's the place where you stop being controlled by your past and start being informed by it. What changes is how you treat distrust itself. You stop using it as a blanket policy and start using it as a filter. Not everyone deserves your guard up. Not everyone is a threat, but not everyone is safe either. And learning to tell the difference, that's where real power lives. This doesn't mean you suddenly become trusting. It means you become discerning. You notice patterns, but you don't let them dictate everything. You remember what happened before, but you don't assume it has to happen again. You protect yourself, but you do it consciously, not compulsively. Reactive distrust is when your past makes the decisions for you. Someone reminds you of a person who hurt you, and you shut them out without even giving them a chance. They say something that sounds like a promise you've heard before, and you dismiss it before they finish the sentence. Your history runs the show, and you're just along for the ride. But strategic distrust? That's different. That's when you observe without assuming, when you give people room to show you who they are, but you stay aware. You don't hand over your vulnerability on the first day, but you also don't lock it away forever. You test the waters without drowning yourself. You move slowly, carefully, but you move. The distinction matters. You stop confusing protection with disconnection. Protecting yourself doesn't mean isolating yourself. It means having boundaries that make sense. It means saying, I'm willing to be close to you, but I'm going to pay attention. Not because I think you're dangerous, but because I know danger doesn't always announce itself. This is what people who've healed from distrust understand. They don't become people who trust easily. They become people who trust wisely. They know that vulnerability isn't weakness, but it's also not something you give to just anyone. It's currency, and you spend it where it's valued, not where it's wasted. There's a concept that matters here. Provisional trust. It's the idea that you can extend trust in small doses and see what happens. You don't have to decide on day one whether someone is safe or dangerous. You can observe. You can give them a little and see if they handle it well. And if they do, you give a little more. And if they don't, you pull back without guilt. This isn't game playing, it's self-preservation with intelligence behind it. Because the people who are worth trusting will understand. They won't rush you. They won't demand access to places you're not ready to open. They'll earn their way in slowly, by being consistent, by showing up, by proving through action, not just words, that they're different. And the ones who aren't worth it, They'll reveal themselves quickly. They'll get frustrated that you're not handing over everything immediately. They'll pressure you to prove you trust them by doing something that makes you uncomfortable. They'll call you damaged or broken for having boundaries. And that's when you know, that's when the filter works. Because people who respect you will respect your pace. So the transformation isn't from distrust to trust. It's from unconscious protection to conscious choice. From reacting to your trauma to learning from it. From letting your past write your future to letting your past inform your present without controlling it. You stop being the person who doesn't trust anyone. You become the person who trusts carefully, deeply, and only where it's earned. And that's not coldness. That's not damage. That's survival that evolved into wisdom. And maybe the greatest act of courage isn't trusting again. It's knowing when not to trust and still remaining human. Still staying open to the possibility that not everyone will hurt you. Still believing that connection is worth the risk, even if the risk is real. So here's the truth about people who don't trust anyone. They're not broken, they're adapted. And there's a difference that matters. Broken implies something that needs fixing. Something that stopped working the way it should. But adaptation is intelligence. It's the mind doing exactly what it's designed to do. Taking in information, recognizing patterns, and adjusting behavior to increase chances of survival. When someone stops trusting, they're not malfunctioning. They're responding accurately to the data they've collected. Their system looked at the evidence, ran the numbers, and came to a logical conclusion. In their experience, trust has been weaponized more often than it's been honored. So they adapted. They learned, they changed. The question was never whether they could trust again. The question was whether they should. And for a long time, the answer their nervous system gave them was no. Not because they wanted to be alone, but because being alone hurt less than being betrayed by someone you let close. Most people don't understand that this kind of adaptation isn't permanent. It's not a life sentence. It's a response to conditions. And when conditions change, when the environment proves itself different, the adaptation can change too. Slowly, carefully, but it can change. This doesn't mean you suddenly become the person you were before. You don't unlearn the lessons that kept you alive. You don't forget what you know about how people can be. But you do start to distinguish between wisdom and prison. Between protection that serves you and protection that suffocates you. Because the paradox of distrust is this: it's meant to keep you safe, but if you're not careful, it becomes the thing you need safety from. The walls you built to keep pain out become the walls that keep life out. And at some point, you have to ask yourself which is worse: the risk of being hurt by someone else, or the certainty of being isolated by your own defenses. Some scars never fully disappear. That's the reality. You can heal, you can grow, you can learn to trust again in ways that are careful and conscious. But you'll always carry the knowledge of what happened. You'll always have that part of you that remembers. And that's not weakness, that's information. That's the part of you that learned something true about the world. The key is learning to live with that knowledge without letting it control you. To let it inform your choices without making all your choices for you. To remember what happened without assuming it has to happen again with every new person you meet. This is where distrust evolves from wound into wisdom. You stop seeing everyone as a potential threat and start seeing people as individuals who have to earn their place in your life. You stop confusing openness with naivety. You understand that being careful doesn't mean being cold. That having boundaries doesn't mean being closed off. The shift that happens is internal. You start to realize that the strongest position isn't total trust or total distrust. It's discernment. It's the ability to read situations, to assess people, to move closer or pull back based on what you're actually seeing, not what you're afraid of seeing. You learn that some people will hurt you. That's true. But some people won't. And closing yourself off to everyone because of the ones who did means you're still letting those people control your life. They're still making your decisions for you, just from a distance now. Real freedom isn't trusting everyone or trusting no one. It's knowing you can survive either outcome. That if someone betrays you, it will hurt, but it won't destroy you. Because you've been hurt before and you're still here, you're still standing, and you can stand again if you need to. This is the final transformation. From someone who doesn't trust because they're afraid of pain, to someone who chooses carefully because they value their peace. From someone who built walls out of fear, to someone who maintains boundaries out of self-respect. You stop being reactive and start being intentional. You stop being haunted by your past and start being guided by it. You stop asking, can I trust them? and start asking, have they shown me who they are, and does that match what I need? And maybe, just maybe, you start to see that distrust was never the enemy. It was a phase, a necessary season in a longer journey. The part where you learned that not everyone deserves access to you. The part where you discovered that your presence, your energy, your vulnerability, these are valuable. They're not things you scatter freely, they're things you place carefully. So if you're someone who doesn't trust anyone, or if you know someone who lives this way, understand this. It's not a flaw, it's not something that needs to be fixed or rushed or shamed. It's a response, an adaptation, a way of surviving that made sense at the time. And when the time is right, when the conditions allow it, it can evolve, not into blind trust, but into something better, into wisdom, into discernment, into the quiet confidence of someone who knows their worth and protects it without apology. Because in the end, we're not meant to be completely open or completely closed. We're meant to be awake, aware, present enough to see what's real and strong enough to walk away from what's not. And the people who don't trust anyone? They've already learned half of that equation. They know how to walk away. Now the journey is learning when to stay, not because someone convinced them, but because someone earned it. And that's not damage. That's growth. Now you've seen how distrust shapes the way we protect ourselves and connect with others. Click the video on your screen right now. You're about to discover something that will completely shift how you see human behavior and power dynamics. Click now.